Production team, this is the sermon for September 13th. Here we go. Do you believe? No, wait a second. Do you believe? How's that? Do you believe in the power of humor? Do you believe in the power of humor? Jesus did. It's at the heart of the parables. This parable especially. It's a terrifying, ridiculous story of forgiveness and lack of forgiveness and judgment. It's got that horrible moment in the middle where that one servant turns to the other servant and says, "Pay what you owe." But there's also ridiculous moments. These two sums of money are literally like knee-slapping jokes, especially the first one. And the first one sets up the second one. This 10,000 talents that's been forgiven. Check it out. 10,000 talents in today's currency is something like $4.5 billion. So there's Jesus sitting around a campfire on some lovely autumnal evening around the Sea of Galilee, telling a story and telling his friends about this dude who went to the king, the boss, and needed to sort out his debt, and it was $4.5 billion. And you can just imagine somehow a skit worthy of Saturday Night Live. And he has then said, "Yeah, cool, $4.5 billion, no problem. You're good. Off you go." He then encounters somebody who owes him 100 denarii, which surprising to me, is a substantial amount. It's sort of a third of a year of what an average worker would have earned in the Roman Empire at that time. So in today's dollars, one commentator suggested it was like 10 or 15 grand. Pay what you owe is how the guy who just got let off of the $4.5 billion debt, and he has to collect that $10,000 to $15,000 amount owed to him by his fellow servant. And the story unwinds from there. You see, the drama starts to build, the word gets out, and the fellow servants report to the king, the boss, and suddenly things don't look so good for the guy who had been forgiven the $4.5 billion. I can see the skit. I can see the humor. I can also feel the power of that story. I can feel the drama of that story and the ways in which a good comic, and we're able to hear so many wonderful ones, aren't we, these days? I know, tell me the ones that you're hearing. Feel free to put it on our YouTube comment section. Hannah Gadsby, incredible voice, incredible Australian woman talking about coming out as a lesbian and just finding her way in life, and incredible humor, and also heartbreaking emotion, and also an insightful judgment on the current state of her society. Trevor Noah, the face of television, evening television, late night television, but with roots as South African, and able to tell a story of race and of his experience in that society and his experience in the United States. Again, knee-slapping humor, bring a tear to your eye, but also figure out what's going on in the world. Jesus was in that cohort. That's where Jesus lived. There's a wonderful book of one of my favorite books. It's called Raid on the Articulate, and it's written by John Dominic Crossan, where Crossan explores Jesus' sense of humor. And it has those qualities of surprise, of the surprising joke, of the warm intimacy of getting to know somebody in a certain moment in their life, in a conflict, and of also understanding a little more at the end of the parable about what's going on in the world and where you better stand. Because any of these comics, including Jesus, are telling us something that comes from a deep place, a place of passion and conviction. In this case, Jesus is telling us about what it means to be forgiven, what it means for you to let go of the $4.5 billion worth of concerns or burdens or obsessions or whatever that might look like for you. And I don't know that Jesus doesn't spell it out. And given the context, he's not a psychologist. He's not necessarily telling you to feel better about life, although I think in 21st century Christianity, that tends to be sort of where we anchor some of our thinking around Jesus' gift. But wherever we end up taking it, it starts by just, it's gone. The king says, you're good. Go on with your life. Go on with your life and let go of that inordinate debt that you somehow have acquired, that you somehow have sometimes obsessed about. Sometimes our debts are what we're obsessed are what we hold closest. We hang on to them when we hold on to little else. We hold on to them because somehow they tell us who we are. To let them go is a bold and creative moment, and it is a gift from the king in this version of this story. This surprising, let it go, you're good. But then you pause. Or you better pause and think twice about how you behave around your fellow servant. The story, and this is my take today. There's so many ways that this story underpins and questions authority and dominance and the idea that only certain people are able to forgive or be forgiven, that we've earned our way into a certain place of grace. Jesus is undermining many of those traditional notions, undermining them in his Jewish, Galilean, Roman Empire context, but helping me undo them in my own time. As a white male preacher with some sense of a coherent message that I hope to deliver, that at some point Jesus' message to me is about that the story isn't about me correctly mansplaining Jesus' message one more time. That the parable may be about unlocking, unburdening ourselves of some of those tendencies. That notion that only certain people merit Christian leadership. No. Hearing imagination in our midst, hearing the people who who even in the heaviness, in the burden of our COVID world, and we still, of course, live deeply within that world. However, I would like to move on to another chapter. We're not there yet. And so we live with those burdens, and in the midst of those burdens, we could feel a certain lightness of spirit. I think the parable is inviting me to proclaim that lightness of spirit for you. I think somehow the parable, as I share it with you in this context, as we're entering back into fall activities, as lots of folks are experiencing the school year again with so many complications, with such a sense of risk, also anticipating a reward, the blessing of being together. As we're finding our way as congregations, as this wonderful collective in the East End of Ottawa, as expressions of faith across the country, experimenting and exploring what we've been trying to free ourselves up to do for a long time, maybe this is a moment where the powerful humor of Jesus' parable could undo us. So we lay aside our crazy, massive debts that force us to act a certain way and behave in a certain pattern and set up certain objectives as Christian communities. And what if we imagined something where we were simply free and blessed? I wish that led. I know even my brain wants that to lead to a little bit of a game plan. Jesus, well, this story doesn't get us there. This story then cautions me to let myself feel free and blessed, and then make sure that as I encounter others, I honor their freedom and their blessedness. No more of that. Pay what you owe. Pay what you owe. And we cast that out so often. There are so many ways that microaggressions take the sort of subtle form of pay what you owe. And I don't always get it when I'm part of that pay what you owe culture. I'm so grateful for critiques and revisions and just renewal energy around hearing voices that challenge us and challenge me to hear the ways in which microaggressions come out against all people, but specifically in our context around race, around gender, sexual orientation. Wired into so many of those pay what you owe moments is that aggressive sense that we've sort of got something important here. Well, maybe it is important. But maybe that's not the whole story. And maybe at a certain level, what's important is the relationship that we've cultivated within that thing that we've created. So it isn't so much about creating Mackay United Church and Orleans United Church and each of the congregations involved in our project. It's about all the myriad relationships, all the things I kind of owe you and you sort of owe me, and we have a little bit of debt here and a little bit of forgiveness there, and how are we going to all play nicely with what's in front of us? And then along comes Jesus the humorist, Jesus the comic, saying, you've been freed. You are blessed. Walk away from your sense of entitlement. And do not impose that entitlement on those other voices in your community. Hear them in a new way. Hear them in a fresh way. When Crossan titled his study of Jesus' sense of humor, Raid on the Articulate, he was saying something so profound. The articulate religious leadership needed to be challenged. The coherent doctrine of Jesus' day and of our day needs to be challenged. And often it was through humor that Jesus created a raid on the articulate to lift up something that was hard to speak of, hard to name, that felt almost inarticulate. And let that be the place of truth and power. It's a remarkably creative place to go. It's a place that connects us with so many incredible voices. It helps me hear those Trevor Noah and Hannah Gadsby as gospel storytellers. It helps me hear Jesus with a fresh power when I hear him unlocking the classic sort of doctrinally centered forms of Christianity and destabilizing my identity. As I imagine our work as a community of faith in this time, I think there are so many opportunities for us to claim this parable as a defining invitation to acknowledge burdens and debts and then let them go and feel that freedom and that blessedness, and ensure that we share that freedom and that blessedness with those around us. May God bless us as we allow ourselves the freedom to let go of the $4.5 billion debts, of the $10,000 to $15,000 debts, the ways in which we identify and weigh ourselves down through those debts. Be with us, O God, as we allow ourselves to be freed and to be blessed. Amen. Thank you.